ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show here on 77 WABC, where we're making AM radio great again. 77 WABC is the crown jewel of AM talk radio, and for the next 2 hours, from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, which, by the way, is our new time, we will be here talking news, politics, history, style, and culture. So don't touch that dial. Keep it set at 770 AM, perhaps the most powerful and influential AM radio signal in America today. If you're in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, 770 on the AM dial is the place to be for the next 2 hours. But I actually recommend that you download the 77 WABC radio app to your cell phone right now. It's a great privilege for me to follow Lou Dobbs, one of the most historic and greatest newsmen in American journalistic history. But you don't want to miss any of the amazing lineup of talk radio and entertainment here at 77 WABC. I'm talking not only about the great Lou Dobbs, but Sid Rosenstein and friends in the morning, the incredible Larry Kudlow, the apostle of economic growth, who quarterbacked the revitalization of the American economy under President Donald Trump. He's here on Saturdays. You don't want to miss Cindy Adams, the queen of gossip, who always has the inside skinny on the beautiful people and what they're up to. You don't want to miss the offbeat and always provocative programming of Frank Morano on the other side of midnight. And, of course, you don't want to miss the greatest mayor in New York City history, perhaps the greatest mayor in American history, Rudy Giuliani, who is here every single day on weekdays. You also don't want to miss my old friend Dominic Carter, always has his fingers on the pulse of what's going on in New York. And, of course, Rita Cosby, who really blows me away every night with breaking news and incredible headliners as her guests, telling you what's happening that day and, what's going to happen tomorrow. And, of course, you don't want to ever miss Katz and Cosby. That's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. John Katz and Rita Cosby usually have an absolute all-star panel. You can hear them at 5 o'clock during the week on weekdays, 8 o'clock Sunday morning. It really sets the table for your entire Sunday. So download that 77 WABC app so you don't miss a single bit of this great programming. I myself am having a pretty Sicilian Sunday. I've got a pot of gravy on the stove. Today, it's a little different. Instead of making my famous meat sauce, I made a marinara sauce, a tomato sauce, known to some folks in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Philadelphia area as a gravy. But today, in all honesty, I featured the meatballs. Let me give you my meatball recipe, since I have quite a few texts and emails asking me. You saute onions and garlic in some high-quality olive oil. You throw that mixture into a big bowl. You add 3 pounds of meat. That would be 1 pound of ground veal, 1 pound of ground beef, 1 pound of ground pork. You add freshly grated Parmesan. You add 3 cups of Italian breadcrumbs, 6 eggs whipped, freshly chopped parsley, about a 1/4 cup. Parsley is very strong. You don't want to use too much of it. 1 tablespoon of oregano, 1 tablespoon of basil, 1 tablespoon of thyme, 1 tablespoon of marjoram, 2 tablespoons of kosher salt, and about a tablespoon of ground black pepper. I then add 3/4 cup of water, and I form my meatballs, keeping them kind of loose. Now, you want to brown those meatballs in a pan using the same olive oil that you sauteed the onions and garlic in earlier. And after you have browned them, constantly turning so there's no flat sides, so they remain perfectly round, you are going to preheat your oven and put a Pyrex dish, a 9/11 size dish, let's say, filled with water on the bottom shelf of your oven. This is one of my secrets to maintain the moisture for the perfect meatball. Now, take your meatballs, put them on a large baking sheet at 350 degrees for 40 minutes, and they're done. Now, when you're ready, you drop them into your sauce. We've given you the sauce recipe on many occasions, but you can find it in my book, Stone's Rules, and I guarantee you, you will have the perfect meatballs. Be sure to check it out. Joining our show today will be FBI whistleblower Kyle Serafim, who's featured in the new film by Dinesh D'Souza, Police State, who's going to talk to us about the weaponization and politicization of the FBI. You may remember we had Dinesh D'Souza last Sunday to talk about this groundbreaking new film. Also joining us on today's program is veteran New York City police officer Salvatore Greco to talk about the recent raid by the FBI on Eric Adams' top fundraiser, as well as his own ongoing legal fight over his wrongful termination by the New York Police Department. And then in the final half hour, I am going to take your phone calls. That's right. For the first time, I'm going to take your phone calls. It's all here at 77 WABC on The Roger Stone Show. As a protege of President Richard Nixon, I'm asked constantly about the iconic photo of President Nixon and Elvis Presley that was taken on December 21st, 1970. Why would the king want to meet the president? It's interesting that to this day, that is the single most requested photograph in the history of the U.S. National Archive. But why did the king want to meet the president? Elvis was in his white fringe jumpsuit period, and when he showed up that morning at the White House, he was actually wearing a purple velvet jumpsuit, a gold belt, and the Secret Service had to relieve him of a Colt 45 pistol. He had presented a personal letter to President Nixon to the Executive Protection Service guards at the White House that said, quote, "I have done in-depth study of drug abuse and communist brainwashing techniques, and I'm right in the middle of the whole thing where I can and will do the most good, the 35-year-old rocker wrote in his letter to Nixon. He noted that young people see him as one of them, thus making him the perfect person to help in the fight against illegal drugs. I would love to meet you just to say hello if you are not too busy, Elvis wrote. Elvis, a collector of police badges, actually wanted a badge from the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs and wanted to be named a federal agent at large. Priscilla Presley, Elvis's then wife, wrote in her memoirs, Elvis and Me, that the narc badge presented some kind of ultimate power to the king. With the federal narcotics badge, she wrote, Elvis believed he could legally enter any country, both wearing guns and carrying any drugs he wished. She would later note that Elvis made a distinction in his mind behind the illegal drugs popular in the summer of love and the prescription drugs that would ultimately take his life from abuse. Now, there is no transcript of what must have been a somewhat bizarre meeting, although in 2016 an actual movie was made entitled Elvis and Nixon, which starred Kevin Spacey as Nixon and Michael Shannon as Elvis. What we do know about that fateful meeting comes mostly from a memo written by one of Nixon's aides. Nixon mentioned that he thought Elvis could reach young people, but it was important for Presley to retain his credibility. Presley responded that he did his thing just by singing. He said he could not get to the kids if he made a political speech on stage, but he had a way to reach them in his own way. Nixon nodded in agreement. Elvis indicated that he thought the Beatles had actually been a real force for anti-American spirit. Elvis said the Beatles came to this country, made their money, and then returned to England, where they promoted an anti-American theme. It is recorded that Nixon nodded but expressed some surprise. Nixon then indicated that those who use drugs are also those in the vanguard of anti-American protest. Violence, drug abuse, dissent, and protest all seem to merge generally in the same group of young people, as far as Richard Nixon believed. The king indicated to the president in a very emotional manner that he was, quote, on your side. Elvis Presley kept repeating that he wanted to be helpful, that he wanted to restore some respect for the flag, which was being lost. He mentioned he was just a poor boy from Tennessee who had gotten a lot from his country, and he wanted to find some way to repay it. As I mentioned earlier, he also said he'd been studying communist brainwashing and the drug culture for over 10 years. He mentioned he knew a lot about this and was accepted by the hippies. He said he could go right into a group of young people or hippies and be accepted, which he felt could be helpful in his anti-drug drive. The president indicated again that his concern that Presley retain his credibility. At the conclusion of this bizarre meeting, Presley again told the president how much he supported him, and then in a spontaneous gesture, put his left arm around President Richard Nixon and hugged him. Now, the badge that was presented to Elvis Presley was an honorary one, but Elvis never knew that. He thought it was the real thing. Strangely enough, according to members of Elvis's band who accompanied him to the meeting with the 37th president, Elvis was high as a kite. Elvis actually brought a pair of antique dueling pistols to give Nixon as a gift for the meeting, but that set off alarm bells with the Secret Service when it was put over the radio that Elvis Presley was in the White House, and he had a set of pistols with him. After the meeting, Elvis Presley, who I remind you was wearing a purple velvet jumpsuit, a gold cape, and a giant gold belt with a medallion, was asked what he thought of Richard M. Nixon. "He's a really groovy cat," the king said, "but he dresses kind of funny." And that is the inside story on the historic meeting between Richard Nixon and Richard Nixon and the greatest rocker of his age, Elvis Presley. You can go online and see that picture. It is, as I said, the single most requested picture from the National Archives. If you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show here on 77 WABC. In the meantime, there's an organized and unyielding effort to keep President Donald Trump off the 2024 ballot in Colorado, Minnesota, and Michigan. A small group of moderate Republicans and dark money-funded Democrats who control anti-Trump organizations are continuing to do everything possible within the framework of the law to keep Trump off the ballot. This matter is actually on trial in Denver, Colorado today, and the trial over the litigation commences again tomorrow. The litigants seek to declare Trump as a de facto insurrectionist who attempted to overthrow the government, and therefore argue that he is ineligible to run according to Section 3 of Article 14 of the U.S. Constitution. The problem with this, of course, is that Donald Trump has never been charged or convicted of any such crimes. The Never Trumpers' clear goal is to keep the former president off the ballot for 2024 in Colorado, as well as other states. New Hampshire and Florida have already rejected legal appeals. This is, in my opinion, a glaring example of the long-running, nationally organized effort to prevent Donald Trump from reclaiming the presidency and clearing the stench of the currently corrupted government in Washington, D.C. Now, this is a bench trial with no jury, leaving the decision solely up to a Democrat judge appointed by the Democrat governor. The judge, Sarah B. Wallace, has promised a ruling by the end of November. This case is likely not to end at the trial level. Should Trump, as expected, lose a ruling from a partisan judge who, by the way, actually gave a contribution to an anti-Trump, anti-January 6th Republican group, and therefore should have recused herself, but denied a motion by Trump's lawyers to do so, then the case would most likely go first to the Colorado State Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the Colorado State Supreme Court is dominated by Democrats and is also notoriously political. One can then assume that the case would go to the U.S. Supreme Court. The trial began with overly dramatic testimonies about the U.S. Capitol so-called insurrection, completely ignoring Trump's call for peace and respect for law enforcement, or his call on people at the Capitol to disperse. The plaintiffs, a mix of establishment, Rhino, Colorado Republicans, and unaffiliated voters supported by the liberal watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, which is, of course, funded by leftist George Soros, are attempting to tie Trump to the events of January 6th. Their argument hinges on this provision in the 14th Amendment, which bars individuals who engaged in insurrection or rebellion from holding office. There's a number of legal problems with this challenge, which Trump also faces right now in Minnesota as well as Michigan. Because Trump allegedly engaged in insurrection, they're arguing that he is disqualified by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. There's three major legal problems with this claim, however. Trump never held any applicable federal office under the statute. It specifically says that this applies to members of Congress or officers of the United States or state officials. Trump, based on previous Supreme Court rulings, has never been any of those. He never held state office, has never been a U.S. senator or representative, and the U.S. Supreme Court held in 1888 that officers were only those individuals who are appointed to positions within the federal government. Individuals who are elected, such as the president and the vice president, are not officers within the meaning of Section 3. The Supreme Court reiterated that view again in 2010, and it was Chief Justice John Roberts who concluded the people do not vote for officers of the United States. It's important to note that Donald Trump has neither been charged nor convicted of insurrection or rebellion. No federal court has convicted Trump of engaging in either of these crimes in violation of 18 U.S.C. 2383, which makes it a crime to engage in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States. More importantly, in the second impeachment trial, the resolution that was passed by the U.S. Senate, he was specifically charged with incitement of insurrection. However, he was acquitted by the U.S. Senate. Given our federal constitutional system, state and federal courts should not gainsay the findings of Congress on this issue. The risk of inconsistent rulings from state and county election officials, as well as from many different courts hearing these challenges, could cause electoral chaos in the United States. Further, Congress has never passed a federal statute providing any type of enforcement mechanism for Section 3 of Article 14. This is part and parcel of the larger effort of lawfare. That is the illegitimate use of the federal judicial system or the state judicial systems to try to delegitimize the candidacy of Donald Trump. Does anyone think that this would be happening if Donald Trump was not leading in the polls? A new Real Clear Averages poll today showed Donald Trump leading in 5 of the 6 swing states. This has caused a hysteria among his supporters. I was fortunate enough to see the president the night before last at dinner at Mar-a-Lago, and I must tell you, for a man under this kind of pressure and stress, he really does look terrific. First time I've seen him in a long, long time not wearing a necktie, and he has lost a little weight. He actually looked quite fit to me. So, what will happen here? Well, the president is in for a long slog. I predicted back in April that there would be an effort to gag him in the D.C. trial. Indeed, the prosecution there, Special Counsel Jack Smith, made a motion to gag the president. The federal judge, Chutkin, initially stayed that gag order. Then she subsequently enacted and ordered on that gag order. Trump's lawyers then appealed, and to my surprise, an appeals panel made up of 2 judges appointed by Barack Obama and one judge appointed by Joe Biden stayed that order. We are still awaiting to see how this ends up, but it is outrageous that they would seek to limit the First Amendment rights of a candidate for president of the United States. Not just a candidate for president, but a candidate for president who is leading his opponents in the polls. Whether the United States is going to have the first three-way race with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. As an independent candidate, well, that remains to be seen. Interestingly enough, polling published again by Real Clear Politics this week really shows that a poll taken by the Messenger, commissioned of the Harris Organization, a poll taken by Quinnipiac, a poll taken by USA Today, and a Harvard-Harris poll, all showed that the candidacy of Robert Kennedy, a former Democrat, now seeking office as an independent, actually siphons more votes from Donald Trump, well, than it does from Joe Biden. I think, frankly, people are getting ahead of themselves because it is premature to determine whether Robert F. Kennedy is going to be on the ballot. As someone who is a veteran of 13 national presidential campaigns, I can tell you that the process to actually get on the ballot is arcane, it is complicated, it is expensive, it is difficult, it is labor intensive, and frankly, it's why we have not had a viable three-way presidential race since Ross Perot ran in 1992. Also changing the calculations here is the position by Professor Cornel West, who had previously mentioned or announced that he would seek election to the presidency as the candidate of the Green Party, but now says that he has abandoned the Green Party and will seek to run as an independent. This makes very little sense to me. You see, the Green Party already has permanent ballot access in some 30 states, and that would have meant that Professor West, Dr. West, I believe it is, would only have to petition his way on the ballot in the balance of the 20 states, an extraordinarily expensive and difficult process. One wonders whether Professor West is serious about continuing his candidacy. There is one other important nuance, however, and that is that under the law, when filing as an independent, one must name their vice presidential running mate at the time they file for ballot access. That means that Robert F. Kennedy has to name his vice presidential candidate far, far earlier than his major opponents, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, should Joe Biden continue to be the candidate of the Democratic Party. I've raised questions about that. Now, my sources tell me that the candidate that Robert F. Kennedy prefers is former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard would indeed make an extraordinarily powerful and impressive vice presidential running mate. But I can also tell you that Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democrat, now an independent, articulately anti-war, is also on Donald Trump's short list. It is therefore unclear whether Robert Kennedy can get on the ballot in enough states to theoretically win 270 electoral votes. It is also unclear whether he can name a powerful and compelling vice presidential running mate in time for those filings. And I would notice that former Congressman from Ohio, Dennis Kucinich, who himself ran for twice as an anti-war candidate for the Democratic nomination for president, recently quietly resigned as the chairman of RFK's campaign. That's my breakdown of the political outlook for this week. I'm Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show. Buckle your seatbelt. We have a jam-packed show for you.
It's The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
PMS, pregnancy, menopause. Being a woman is a lot. Ollie supports you and yours with expert solutions for every age and life stage. They just launched 2 new products exclusively at Walmart. Period Hero combats flow, mood swings, and more during PMS. And Balance Perimeno to support hormonal balance, mood, and metabolism during perimenopause. Grab yours at Ollie.com.
Ollie!
These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Parents of twins, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, streaming now only on Netflix.
In golf, precision is everything, on and off the course. PGA of America chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business for smooth operations and seamless transactions. Together, we enhance ticketing and concessions for better fan experiences from gate to green. This is pro-level efficiency. This is PGA of America with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. I love it when President Trump says not everyone, but to make omelets, one needs to break a few eggs. As my late friend Lee Atwater used to say, show me a person in politics who everybody loves, and I'll show you a loser who's never won an election. This past week, my wife and I had the high privilege of attending the premiere of Dinesh D'Souza's epic new documentary, Police State, which was shown at President Donald Trump's palatial mansion in Palm Beach, Florida, which, folks, I assure you, is worth far more than the $18 million claimed by a Manhattan, New York judge. It was an all-star evening for a powerful film. I hope you had an opportunity to hear our interview with Dinesh D'Souza last Sunday, where he laid this out for us. But among those who were most compelling and impressive in this documentary, Police State, which I commend to you, was Kyle Seraphin. Kyle Serafin is a former FBI agent, now an FBI whistleblower, a constitutionalist, a civil liberties enthusiast, a Second Amendment defender, who, well, understands that Sundays are for God and family. And he is also the host of the Kyle Serafin Show on Rumble. Kyle Serafin, thank you for joining us on The Roger Stone Show.
It is my pleasure, Roger. Good to talk to you.
So there's a lot to talk about today, but for those who are unfamiliar with your background, why don't we start there? When did you join the FBI? Why did you join the FBI? And what were the circumstances of your leaving the FBI?
Okay, fair enough. So the quick and dirty version of this is I joined the FBI in the summer of 2016. That's when I attended Quantico. Anyone who's ever applied for the FBI or has ever tried to go through some of these longer federal hiring processes will know it takes 18 months, 2 years to get yourself on board. And my route of entry was as a veteran. I was a veteran of the United States Air Force, which I started serving when I was 27 years old. So my story actually goes back a little ways. I started off working in radio as an airtime salesperson. I worked in ergonomic furniture. I was one of these guys that was trying to get my feet under me at a younger age and didn't quite get there. And by the time I was 27, I realized I wasn't creating or destroying anything. I wasn't doing what I felt like God's purpose was for me on Earth. And so I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. I wanted to see what it felt like. Even though I had a college degree, I wanted to know what it was to be an enlisted guy. And I did that for just shy of 4 years. I was let out of my contract a little bit early, applied for federal employment, ended up at the FBI, and worked 2 years of counterintelligence, 3 years of a specialty surveillance unit, which was actually not considered a very prestigious job, but something that I felt was the original, kind of the OG work that the FBI does, which is to say, go see bad guys where they are, watch what they're up to. And I got a good look at the counterterrorism program. I got more looks at counterintelligence and more looks at some of the criminal work. And then in an effort to get out of D.C. and get away from the sort of the politics that exist, I took a job in New Mexico. And I did the exact opposite of what everyone thought would happen. I started working for an Indian reservation. I was doing investigations out there of really sort of like local crimes as a sort of major crimes detective. And at that moment, I got an email handed from one of the supervisors in my office that indicated the FBI was going to be investigating parents at school board meetings, which many people are now familiar with. I brought that to Congress in October of 2021. And between that and my refusal to get the shot, the COVID vaccine shot, it was sort of a death knell for my bureau career, but it did lead to an interesting opportunity of many people approaching me and saying, here's some additional things that we see that are wrong in the FBI. And since you're already burned and you're already a public figure at this point, maybe you can help expose them. So I've done that. Between me and Stephen Friend and a guy named Garrett O'Boyle, many people saw them testify in front of Congress. You'll see that there's probably, I think, upwards of a dozen instances of FBI malfeasance that we've been able to publicly expose with a strange sort of new life that I think God has me living at this point.
Well, now, you made what you believe to be a protected disclosure to a freshman member of Congress from Albuquerque, citing 5 U.S.C. 7211. That statute reads, the right of employees, individually or collectively, to petition members of Congress or to furnish information to either House or Congress or to a committee may not be interfered with or denied. And as you mentioned, you were refused to take the mandatory COVID-19 shot. I can imagine how that tied the agency into knots. What were the immediate reactions within the FBI and the Department of Justice when you took these actions?
They're pretty predictable. The first thing that happened is by November of 2021, I was removed from the office and told that I couldn't come back in. And I'll give your audience just a little bit more perspective. I've been a licensed paramedic in multiple states, and at the time, and I think still, I'm a licensed paramedic according to the quote-unquote state of the FBI, which is this sort of fantasy realm. But I've been a nationally registered paramedic for over a decade. And one of the things that I did during my post-military and pre-FBI careers, I worked in a hospital. I spent thousands of hours in a clinical setting, and I also spent thousands of hours working on an ambulance doing transportation. So I've done a lot of flu swabs, and I've done a lot of tests for various different sort of symptoms. And so the FBI gave us a secondary option. They said, if you don't take the vaccine shot, we're going to give you another way to bend the knee. You must test for COVID, even though you have no symptoms, every 72 hours. And for me, this was a direct highlight. First of all the people that I knew that had refused to take the shot were all pro-life Christians. And so they basically were saying every Christian that wants to stand up for this particular stance must identify themselves to all of their employee colleagues by going and taking a shot. It was allowed to be done on company time. But there's really no precedent for doing that sort of a thing. And there's also really no prophylactic protocol for flu or any other disease that I'm aware of. And I've done, like I said, thousands of nasal swabs. It was really a strange opportunity. So I said no thank you to that. And that's what actually got me removed without pay from my job for all of November, or end of November rather, December, January, February, and the beginning of March. And it was so obvious to those of us working there that it was an arbitrary sort of rule, because it was changed simply because Joe Biden was giving the State of the Union address in the first week of March in 2022. And when that happened, they basically withdrew all of the requirements to test and mask and everything that was going to be especially strange for those of us that had not gotten those shots, even if we'd already recovered from COVID like I had. And so that was kind of a sad thing to see, but it did sort of point out the hypocrisy and the moving goalposts that many of us experienced in the last couple of years. And I think it's awakened a lot of people to some of the major problems of just blind obedience to the federal government.
What was the immediate impact on your family of your termination for those many months right up to today?
That's a good question. It resulted predictably in a loss of income. That was the immediate thing. So my wife and I had to make some difficult decisions. In September of 22, I sold my home. And many people don't know this, even if they follow me publicly, but I left the closing table selling my house in New Mexico, which was a beautiful place, by the way. It was on 2 acres. We had a mountain view. It was a very inexpensive place in the world where we could have just a really nice place to live. We had wonderful neighbors that were friends with my kids. And we left the closing table. My wife drove our minivan to Arizona, where we ended up staying with my parents. And we stayed in 2 of the 3 bedrooms that they have in their small home in Arizona. I drove directly south to El Paso, got on a plane, and flew and did an interview, my first public interview, with Dan Bongino, which basically blew up my life into a totally different path and kind of moved me into a route that I had not previously expected. But we effectively were without a home, at least not a home of our own, and we were sort of freeloading on my parents, who are in their 60s and 70s. My dad being in his mid-70s. I had to go and, as a 40-year-old man with 3 children, moved back home, which was not a thing that I ever anticipated doing, and definitely was a kind of a bitter pill of humility because we had no income to speak of for over a year.
So Kash Patel, who I think is a great American hero, and by the way, whose testimony in this Colorado trial I spoke of earlier in the show, where they are attempting to remove Donald Trump for the ballot in Colorado based on a claim that he engaged in insurrection, but Kash Patel actually provided testimony and written proof that President Donald Trump offered the D.C. government, the Capitol Hill Police, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, 10,000 National Guard troops to maintain order at the Capitol, and that request was denied, proving yet again that Trump was not involved in an effort towards insurrection. If anything, he had an interest in maintaining order at the Capitol. In any event, Kash Patel has an active foundation in which he has raised money to support FBI whistleblowers. I've had Stephen Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both on my show, interviewed both of them, saw them both last week at Mar-a-Lago. Congressman Dan Goldman of Manhattan actually claims that FBI whistleblowers were bribed by Kash Patel for their testimony. Can you address that?
Absolutely. Yeah, Mr. Goldman has an interesting perspective. It's sort of revisionist type history. All your audience has to do is weigh the following. You had two men, and I was given a small sort of bridge grant is what the Cash Foundation calls it. But you just have to decide, did these men blow up their careers? Did they give up 120, 130? The federal job tops at $170,000 a year. So do they blow up these 20-year careers for a one-time or a couple-time, $5,000 payment from a charitable foundation because they were without pay? And it's immediately ridiculous on its face. But it is a talking point that they've kind of marched out there. I agree with you. Kash Patel is a wonderful person. He's one of the most down-to-earth and humble, but yet still intelligent and aggressive individuals. We deal with him all the time. He was actually the guy that we pulled up when we got to Mar-a-Lago last week, and his car was right behind ours. And he just said, "Hey, what's up, guys? Like, all right, you're with me. We're going to go on a tour." And we went and kind of just toured around Mar-a-Lago, which I also agree with you is certainly valued. Probably the landscaping is worth $18 million, just the size of the grounds alone. Forget the buildings on it. But he's a wonderful person. It's an absurd claim. He's somebody that saw a problem. And when he reached out to me the first time, he said, "I'd like to help you. I heard your family's in kind of a rough way." And I said, "Well, there's certainly more deserving parties than me, I think. My family's not going to go without a meal." And he said, "Well, regardless, I have money. I'd like to give it to you. And can I do that?" And I said, "Sure. How can I help you out?" And he said, "I don't need anything from you. I'm not going to ask anything from you. If you want to get loud and come on a podcast or you want to do an interview at some point, that's another conversation that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. This is simply your family has done the right thing and are suffering because of it. We know how expensive that is, and I want to help you out." That's the Fight with Cash Foundation. And that's Kash Patel for you. He's a guy that asked nothing. He's never asked me for anything. And I would volunteer a number of, help in any way that I could. I share his posts on social media as best I can, which has minimal value, I think. End of the day, he's a guy that wants to do the right thing. And as you said, he's a great ally to have. And I know he's very loyal to President Trump. And it makes me respect President Trump more, honestly, the type of people that are around him. They're an indicator. The company you keep is really an indicator of the type of person you are. And if you got the loyalty of a guy like Kash Patel, it says a lot about you, I think.
Kash Patel, for those who don't know, was the acting director of the Department of Defense, a former member of the National Security Staff in the Trump White House, a former federal prosecutor, a man of enormous integrity. His book, Government Gangsters, was held up for some time because when you leave government and you write a book, it requires government approval before you can publish it. Kash Patel had to actually go to court to get an order allowing him to publish that book. Go to governmentgangsters.com and check it out. Now, Kyle, you have said that you saw the infamous memo from Attorney General Merrick Garland directing the FBI to convene meetings with federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial leaders in each federal judicial district to facilitate discussions of strategies for addressing threats against school administrators, board members, teachers, and staff, and to open dedicated lines of communication for threat reporting, assessment, and a response. This appears to be in reaction to the simple and perfectly legal activities of parents of school children showing up at school boards and expressing a concern about the curriculum that their children were being taught. What was the reaction of the Bureau when you came forward with this shocking information?
Well, I want to be really specific because the Whistleblower Protection Act, which is, you mentioned the right of employees to go to Congress. The Whistleblower Protection Act for the FBI is 5 U.S.C. 2303. And it states that that an FBI employee can come forward with any evidence they believe is a violation of law, rule, or regulation, which is exactly what I cited. Now, I heard all the things that you just said, and I knew all those things at the time back in October of 2021. What I also heard was Attorney General Merrick Garland step out in front of Congress and under oath testify that they would not be using Patriot Act tools or counterterrorism resources resources more broadly to investigate parents at school board meetings as requested by this National School Board Association, this lobbying group on behalf of school boards around the country. So when I saw an email, and the email that I brought forward was specifically an email that was written by Carlton Peoples, and he was a assistant director of counterterrorism. And so you can just look at the email. You know where it's coming from. It's coming from what we call CTD, or the Counterterrorism Division. The top person there, Carlton Peoples, the assistant director, saying that the FBI was going to institute a threat tag, which is meant to tag investigations or small parts of investigations, and they were looking to tag information and intelligence about parents at school board meetings. That is expressly the opposite of what the Attorney General said. So it was my belief that he was committing perjury, or he had no idea what the FBI was doing, which seems very unlikely, that he had no idea. And so he's either incompetent or he's engaging in perjury, both of which were a big problem. So that's what I actually brought forward. Once you do that, the FBI went on kind of a witch hunt to figure out who had done it, or a mole hunt, I guess. They determined that I was one of the two people that had brought that forward. I'm not sure if they've ever gotten rid of the other person. That's not someone that I knew. So luckily, in an agency of 36, 37, 38,000 employees, two people saw a problem with this particular email. And granted, not everybody had access to see it. So there was this opportunity. Like I say, I think God puts us in places where we are able to act in the way that we are meant to. But I got an email from one of the attorneys working at the FBI saying, they've identified you as someone who won't take the COVID shot and as a whistleblower. And they asked me what I should do about you. And I told them to promote you, but I think they'll probably get rid of you. And, of course, they ended up getting rid of me not long afterwards. It was a couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks before I was put out on the bricks with no paycheck. So it's fairly quick.
So when I was growing up, the FBI was universally respected as the leading law enforcement agency in the country. Longtime FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover certainly knew how to navigate the Washington swamp, and although he was famous for his files in which he allegedly had dirt on every single politician of both parties, he generally used that information to keep the FBI well-funded and expanded. But I would note that in all cases, when he was asked by presidents, including Presidents John Kennedy, President Lyndon Johnson, President Richard Nixon, to conduct a wiretap, he, in every case, required a letter of authorization from the U.S. Attorney General. That would be consistent with law. Many times those requests for wiretaps evaporated when Hoover asked for a written record of what he, I think, viewed as the political use of the FBI by various presidents. Today, the FBI is under public attack on a number of fronts, specifically not only the matters that you have brought to conclusion today, to the table today, regarding the efforts to spy on and target parents who go to school board members, but these idea that these people are violent domestic terrorists, this is nothing worse than shocking. What do you think the evolution of the FBI has been? When did this begin, and where are we headed?
Well, you mentioned police state earlier on, and that tells the story maybe post 9/11 on how the FBI has become a weaponized part of government and has been basically following the funding trail of terrorism dollars from the U.S. government, from the legislative branch, has authorized them to do any number of things. And it started off going after people that that we would see sort of lionized by the political left, people, Muslims that were being abused, I think, in many ways, that they had illicit contact with them. They were moving sources into places that should otherwise be off limits, like mosques and so on. And then they kind of progressed to this thing that's known as HVEs, or homegrown violent extremists, which is people in the United States legally or that are from the United States, first and second generation, but they have sympathies that lie with terrorist organizations overseas. So imagine a person born in Minneapolis that sympathizes with ISIS. That would be sort of a good example of an HVE. And that led the Bureau to go after what we are now calling DVEs, or domestic violent extremists. And this is going to be everything from so-called white supremacists, which there are some, but many of them are actually protected. They're actually allowed to have that awful ideology. That's sort of the brilliance of the First Amendment. And then there are people now that we've moved on into this sort of anti-government, anti-authority realm, which is sort of how the parents at school board meetings would fall in. But I think all this stuff actually goes back much further, and perhaps we need to make a prequel to the movie Police State, because the police state probably started from the beginning of the FBI. You mentioned that the director Hoover was able to keep them out of the politics of the day and away from sort of the attempted hijacking by individuals that were in the White House. But in many ways, they were just doing the bidding of what Hoover thought was appropriate, and sometimes this was also unconstitutional.
Agreed.
You can go all the way back to 1917, 1919. Before it was even known as the FBI, it was called the Bureau of Investigation. And they had the Palmer raids. And you can go into the 40s and 50s, and there were things that were happening under McCarthy with the Red Scare, and they were going after communists, similar to that sort of thing. So this has been going on. They attacked members of the civil rights community. Famously, there was a letter that was written by a member of the FBI attempting to get Martin Luther King Jr. to commit suicide. And so I think the interesting story that is maybe more broad and maybe more scary, if conservatives are willing to hear it, is that there have always been abuses, but they've sort of fallen on an area where 80% of Americans that love America would kind of go, yeah, but these people aren't really great. And so we're sort of okay with this misuse. I think law enforcement in general maybe has some of these sins going back a long, long ways. And so we're now sort of seeing that political conservatives are now on the receiving end of something that has been, at least in the shadows, for a very long time, and now we all have a chance to experience it. And so it shouldn't actually be a partisan debate. I wish it wasn't. It's not a partisan thing for me. I'm actually a political independent when it comes down to my party affiliation. I would love for us to be able to say this is a danger to liberty, and liberty is something that we should all be able to agree on is important, whether you're political left or right. So it's actually a much older story, and it's a much scarier story when you start digging into it. And my friends who we sort of call ourselves the suspendables. You've mentioned Stephen Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. There's a couple of others. We all kind of see this as a problem, and it's always kind of been there lurking. It's just not been so prevalent, and it hasn't been so brazen, I think. That's the saddest and maybe the scariest part of all this.
All right. Well, I certainly did not mean to imply that Hoover was any kind of angel. Kyle Serafim, we are out of time. I want to thank Kyle Serafim. Make sure you see his podcast on Rumble. Kyle Serafim, American hero, FBI whistleblower. Thank you for joining us on The Roger Stone Show.
Definitely my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Shopping is hard.
I can never find anything in my size.
I don't even know my size.
I buy my clothes the same place I buy my groceries.
There's a better way. Make it easy with Stitch Fix. Just share your size, style, budget, and done. Your personal stylist sends pieces picked just for you.
That was easy.
Stitch Fix. Online personal styling for everyone. Free shipping and returns. No subscription required. Get started today at StitchFix.com.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
Clorox Sentiva smells like lavender. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
All right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC, the crown jewel of AM Talk Radio. Let me remind you that now would be a great time to go to the application store and download the 77 WABC app to your cell phone so you don't miss any of the great programming and entertainment here at 77 WABC. If you don't live in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, you can also listen live in around the world, really, at WABCradio.com. That's WABCradio.com. In our final half hour today, I'm going to be taking your questions. That number, if you are interested, is 800-848-9222. Once again, 800-848-9222. Whether it is about politics, news, culture, food, my famous Italian recipes, style, no question is off the table. Unless, of course, you use obscenity, in which case we will cut you off immediately. This past week, reading from the New York Post, the home of top fundraiser for Mayor Eric Adams was raided by the feds Thursday as part of an investigation over the alleged kickback scheme involving the Turkish government and a Brooklyn-based construction company. Federal agents burst into the Brooklyn home of Brianna Suggs, a campaign consultant and lobbyist, just as Mayor Adams abruptly bailed out on a slate of White House immigration meetings to fly back to the Big Apple almost as soon as he had landed in Washington, D.C., the New York Post confirmed. The raid was connected to a broader public corruption probe by the feds, looking into whether whether money was illegally funneled to Adams' 2021 mayoral campaign via a Williamsburg-based construction company, and was purposely conducted while the mayor was out of town. Now, let's be very clear. Mayor Eric Adams has not been formally charged with anything. And in America, one is still innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But this appears to me to be a gigantic potential corruption scandal because laundering of foreign campaign contributions is specifically illegal under both federal and state law. And New York City has a somewhat unique campaign matching fund scheme in which a politician running for city office gets a legitimate contribution and registers it. That contribution will be matched at 8-1. You see, a campaign for public office is extraordinarily expensive. In other words, the cost of broadcast television, the cost of cable television, the cost of AM and FM radio advertising, the cost of digital advertising is extraordinarily expensive. for a candidate of mayor of New York City, one of the most expensive media markets in the country. Here to talk about this brewing scandal and also his own personal quest to challenge the unjust and unwarranted termination by the New York Police Department of his status as an officer, is a proud son of Staten Island, Salvatore Greco. Sal Greco is a 14-year veteran of the New York City Police Department who had an unblemished record of service to the people of New York City. Sal Greco often pulled the graveyard shift in some of the most dangerous precincts in New York City, and he was terminated by the New York City Police Department, essentially solely because he is a friend of mine. Both Salvatore Greco and I were in Washington, D.C. on January 5th and 6th, but neither one of us was involved in any way in the activities at the Capitol, nor even in the efforts to delay the certification of the Electoral College vote. So in other words, Salvatore Greco did nothing wrong. Joining us now, this proud son of Staten Island, Sal Greco, joins the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger, and it's an honor to be in the Stone Zone and on WABC Radio.
It's great to have you here on the Roger Stone Show. So before we get into the larger issues here, you were terminated under a specific regulation of the NYPD, which seems to me to be enforced extraordinarily selectively. Tell us what regulation you were terminated under.
Certainly, Roger. So in the NYPD Patrol Guide, and the Patrol Guide, if anyone out there doesn't know, that is the guide that every police officer from the rank of police commissioner on down and every civilian member of the NYPD has to follow. So there's a procedure in that. It states it's number 203-10, page 1, paragraph 2, subsection C, public contact, prohibited conduct, general regulations. You cannot, it states this, you cannot wrongfully and knowingly associate with a person reasonably believed to be engaged in or likely to have engaged in criminal activities. That is a provision in the Patrol Guide, and this provision, there are no exceptions to this rule. The way this is written is the way it reads and must be followed. That's the exact provision that they used to terminate me, Roger.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I have read Mayor Eric Adams' biography. He was a New York City police captain prior to his election to the state senate and then his election to the borough presidency prior to his election as mayor. And he admits in his book that he provided paid private security, which, by the way, is perfectly legal, to both Mike Tyson, who is a convicted criminal, and Reverend Louis Farrakhan, who is also a convicted criminal. Therefore, they would fall under the broad rubric of someone who may have or may in the future have engaged in criminal activity. He was also charged departmentally, as you were. He went through an administrative trial, as you did, but in his case, they docked his vacation time for 5 days. In your case, you were terminated. You lost the pension that you had paid into for 14 years. You also lost your standing, meaning since you left NYPD without a good conduct letter, it's impossible for you to find employment working in law enforcement in any other jurisdiction. Do we not have a double standard here?
That's correct, Roger. And It's only a double standard. It's a hypocrisy that still runs amok in the NYPD today, and including Eric Adams himself, that he lets this, fester on. So I want to point out here now, there's a lawsuit that was filed by an officer. He was terminated also on the false pretenses. Jermac Romero, and this is in the New York State Division of Human Rights, EOC. It's a complaint right now in the state court, but it will become a lawsuit. It can be. So he's alleging that the last three administrations, which is the three police commissioners, the last three of them, the current one, Ed Caban, the one that was previous before him, Keyshawn Sewell, who was in my lawsuit, was my police commissioner, terminated me, and the one before her, which was Dermot Shea, they violated this rule, Roger. And I'll tell you how we know that, how he is stating this, and he's alleging his own lawsuit. All right. They associate with someone named Jimmy Rodriguez Jr., a.k.a. Jamie Rodriguez, who he himself is a self-admitted criminal. It's in several publications, including The New Yorker, stated November 9th, 1997. And there's recurring allegations of sale of narcotics, prostitution, other criminal conduct within the former Jimmy's Bronx Cafe and now Consofrito. He is an alleged owner there. It's located on 1315 Commerce Avenue. The establishment is it's called 1315 Restaurant Group, and that SLA under that name is actually under Richard Caban, who is a retired NYPD lieutenant and the brother of Ed Caban. And this place, Consofrito, in a publication of City and State, was listed as one of the top 50 political hangouts in New York, but for Democrats. All right, so there's 3 years at least supported of social media data where literally hundreds of NYPD personnel patronized Consofrito, but there was no discipline there. There's no police officer being disciplined. There's no police commissioner being disciplined. Well, they can't even discipline themselves. Eric Adams would have to actually terminate the police commissioner. And this is where we realize that the NYPD disciplinary system uses arbitrary standards and lacks transparency, at least over the last three administrations we can count. And it's their own hypocritical conduct, including its executive management, because Roger, it's just the upper echelon of the NYPD is constantly pictured with Jimmy and in this place. And it supports the proposition of systematic favoritism, bias, significant inconsistency, how disciplinary cases are initiated, prosecuted, or resolved. And, this Consofrito, if you don't know this, but in the NYPD, they're what's called corruption-prone locations. That's where a police officer would not even step foot in this place because all these allegations are being made or had been happened in the past. And Consofrito, to our knowledge, is not listed on there, and he is alleging that that's because it's Ed Caban's brother is the owner or the SLA owner of the on paper for Consofrito. And there's also allegations that they offer heavily discounted meals to protect and entertainment, to protect the business from federal, state, and local government law enforcement activities. To my knowledge, Roger, and on public records, there's no enforcement going on in this place. No one's visited this place. No one's checking up on them. There's nothing from the New York Sheriff's Office. There's nothing.
It should be absolutely clear, the allegations just laid out by former New York City police officer Salvatore Greco have all been filed in federal court just last week with documentation of all of it. If you're just tuning in, I'm Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. In the next half hour, I'm going to be taking your phone calls. That number, 800-848-9222. I want to hear what's on your mind. So write that number down, 800-848-9222. We continue with former New York City police officer Sal Greco. Sal, correct me if I'm wrong, but several months ago, but after you had filed your lawsuit in which you admit that you lost everything, you lost your pension. You lost your life savings to pay lawyers to bring this lawsuit. You also have said in several interviews the NYPD, for some odd reason, had you under surveillance at the time that your father was near death and finally passed away. I recall that Cardi B, the rapper, entertainer, clearly a convicted criminal herself, was actually invited to speak at the New York City Police Academy, where she quite obviously came in contact with the entire upper echelon of the New York City Police Department. This would seem to me to be yet another violation of the same exact regulation under which you were terminated. But when Mayor Eric Adams was asked about this, he said, "We don't discard people," saying that, I guess he believes in second chances. Well, what about Salvatore Greco? Why were you discarded?
That's the question here, Roger, because apparently, there's a double standard here. As you could see that, even Keyshawn Sewell, who was in my lawsuit, who is also associated with Jimmy Rodriguez, just the other day when we had a hearing in my case in regards to this entire matter, they said that basically the police commissioner rubber stamps the fact that, that piece of paper that said my conduct, my behavior is detrimental to the police department. My friendship with you is detrimental to the police department if I continue my employment. She just rubber stamped that, Roger, apparently to the city lawyer, which is odd to me because she said she actually reviewed it. Remind you, Keyshawn Sewell just got a job with the New York Mets. I don't know if they know that they have just current litigation here. But to go back to the Cardi B, it's fascinating that she came to the police academy and she was invited there and nobody knows this stuff. But the same people, Roger, the deputy commissioner of community affairs, Mark Stewart, and at that time, I believe the chief of training at that time at the police academy was Juanita Holmes. Not only were they all associating with Cardi B there, they also are associating with Jimmy Rodriguez and company at Consofrito, where numerous other criminals and convicted felons seem to hang out at, along with the politicians. It's just mind-boggling to get you just try to get your a grasp on this, and how are all these supervising people in the NYPD allowed to associate with known criminals, and they're the ones that are passing judgment on someone like me or this other officer, Romero, but yet who is holding them accountable? They're judging you, and maybe someone should be judging them.
You raise an excellent point. Let's turn now to the news that broke last week. I again stress that despite all of the news reports, the allegations that Mayor Adams may have accepted laundered funds from Turkish nationals that were laundered through a Brooklyn-based construction company. These are, so far, just allegations widely reported in the New York press. And one is presumed, even Mayor Adams is presumed innocent until actually convicted in a court of law. However, we now learn that prior to the FBI raid, the NYPD sent a unit to Ms. Scruggs' home. I believe it was 3 hours before the FBI raid. And I don't know, perhaps I'm just a wise guy, but I have to wonder, was this to warn her that the FBI raid was coming down and urge her to remain silent about any potential misdeeds by Mayor Eric Adams? The New York City officially says, the New York Police Department says, that this is a routine matter. That doesn't seem routine to me at all. What are these wellness checks, which is what they're calling it? What are they generally used for, Sal?
Well, Roger, in the past, how this would be used is, let's say, in the Organized Crime Bureau at the time when there was an Organized Crime Bureau, if a witness or a defendant in a case, they got in a wiretap that somebody was supposed to, order a hit on somebody, they were going to, quote unquote, whack them, they would have to inform their lawyer by law, or the United States District Attorney, if was involved, would have to go and inform them as a wellness check. Hey, listen, your client is being, there's a hit out on them. They're looking to, murder your client. So in this instance, though, in a wellness check with this, Internal Affairs would not just do a wellness check on anyone unless it's a cop or a witness that they have in a case against the cop. Because this woman, by all standards, by all we're reading about her, she just is a fundraiser. She has nothing to do with the police department. So for the Internal Affairs Bureau to call the 77th precinct and have two officers go by there, this is highly unlikely. This is highly inappropriate, I'd say. You wouldn't do this under any normal circumstances. I don't even think this is an Internal Affairs way of doing things. They're not structured. There's nothing on the books as far as a rule for this. Speaking to people that have been in the Internal Affairs Bureau, they were lifers, we'll call them in there. They've never heard of anything like this. So this is highly unlikely. The fact that the cops went there at 7:30 at night, and then they also stayed in the woman's apartment, and that's all bizarre. And the city saying that this is routine. No, it's not, Eric. Actually, Internal Affairs only does wellness checks for an officer if they believe they're suicidal, or a witness to a case that involves the witness having something to do with the cop that they're investigating. That's the only circumstances you would see. This is highly unusual, Roger.
Look, I have to admit that I, even though he was a Democrat, I used to have a very high regard for Eric Adams when he was in the state Senate, and my good friend, Senate Republican Majority Leader Joe Bruno, was unjustly and falsely accused of corruption, for which he was ultimately acquitted. After his first trial, conviction was overturned on constitutional grounds. The federal government took the rare step of retrying him, a trial in which he was acquitted of all charges. And I attended the trial in Albany, New York, taking the train there. And I admired the fact that Eric Adams, who was a Democrat in a different party, but who had a good working relationship with Majority Leader Bruno, attended the trial every day out of respect for a fellow member of the Senate. More recently, however, I don't really what's happened to Eric Adams. He's like the best-dressed mayor since Jimmy Walker, the most corrupt mayor since William O'Dwyer, and now I have to wonder whether he is the most incompetent mayor since, well, Bill de Blasio. Reading online that he believes God has somehow ordained him to be mayor, I don't know, I find that a little offensive. And now I really wonder whether there is politics involved, as some have said. Reported only hours ago, the FBI is now investigating this tip-off by NYPD of Brianna Suggs, the fundraiser for Mayor Eric Adams, whose home was raided by the FBI. But also, Mayor Adams can't seem to keep his story straight when he comes to the immigration policies of the Biden administration. Initially, he said that New York would be a sanctuary city where illegals would be welcomed. Then he has had a hard time housing them in places where there wasn't community protests about the danger and the unsanitary and dangerous nature of these holding facilities. The Roosevelt Hotel, once one of the most prestigious landmark properties in Manhattan, once the headquarters of New York Mayor John V. Lindsay, Governor Nelson Rockefeller, Governor Thomas E. Dewey, two-time presidential candidate, 1944 and 1948, is now a crime scene, is now being used as a migrant shelter. Mayor Adams blurted it out when he said that these immigration policies would destroy New York. Then he seemed to back off of that. Some have speculated that this FBI raid on Eric Adams could be payback from the Biden administration for the mayor's criticism of the administration's immigration policies. I tend not to believe that, but what do you think, Sal?
Well, it comes to Eric Adams, Roger. Everything about him, from the days of him being a police officer all the way till now being the mayor, it's full of controversy. He's very controversial. As a police officer, he was involved in these organizations with the Guardians and the 100 Law Enforcement Blacks, and there was all kinds of rumors with that and how he raised money with them. That continued with as a state senator. He was involved in the resorts casino scandal. There's testimony out there. You could go read it. You should read it because it's quite interesting to hear him testify. And, through that, also one of his goons, his friend Timothy Pearson, ended up becoming the vice president of the resorts casino. And here's a guy that just recently, he's being investigated now by the Department of Investigations because he allegedly choked out a female and assaulted another security officer who somehow they were arrested and not him. That's another story for another day, but that's another Eric Adams controversy. Same thing as the borough president. There was all kinds of stories because that's where he started this, going to Turkey. He was always visiting Turkey as the Brooklyn borough president. And today as the mayor, where there's all kinds of rumors and all allegations that he hangs out, just like Curtis Sleeve always says, he's at Zero Bond one night in a nightclub, and you could go there and you could kind of wine, dine, and pocket line him there. And now also with Con Sofrito, where we're hearing is multiple birthday fundraisers for the same politician, and Eric Adams just happens to be there. And there's all kinds of allegations with that, where money flowing and where the money goes with all the fundraising. And it's just controversy has always followed Eric Adams from the day he was a police officer until now. So they always say where there's smoke, there's fire. So there's a lot of smoke in regards to Eric Adams, Roger.
All right. We stress again, Mayor Adams has not been formally charged or found convicted of any crime, and any person in America is innocent until proven guilty. But this certainly is a big story. You can go to salgreco.com to learn more about Officer Greco and his fight against his unjust and unwarranted termination by the New York City Police Department. Officer Salvatore Greco, thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show here at 77 WABC Radio.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030.
Hey besties, listen up. I have a secret to tell you. LinkedIn now has improved the job search experience for nurses. Search by your specialty, the shifts you want to work, and the salary that you want to make. With so many employers hiring on LinkedIn, finding the perfect job is even more simplified. So don't spend months searching. Go to linkedin.com/nurses and find out why in the past year, more than 1.5 million nurses have used LinkedIn to search for their next role. That's linkedin.com/nurses.
You need a vacation, so why not come play in LA? Fill your days with fun and let Los Angeles dazzle you with iconic landmarks, epic scenery, and stunning coastlines. And when the sun goes down, it's the perfect place to enjoy world-class dining and nightlife. Let play lead the way and soak up all this city has to offer. Start planning your LA getaway now at visitcalifornia.com.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50. Code listen50. Terms and conditions apply.
Talk Radio 77 WABC. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is indeed the Roger Stone Show. And now we're going to take your questions by phone. So that number, once again, is 800-848-9222. Let me take Joel on line 3 in Manhattan. Joel, you have a question.
Thanks a lot for taking calls, by the way. You're one of my favorites, you know, and, of course, so knowledgeable politically and so forth. So my question basically is, if suddenly out of the blue appears Michelle Obama, right, once she finds out that Biden is not going to run again, would she have a good chance in view of the women voting for her in the majority, and of course African Americans most likely in the majority voting for her? Would she have a pretty good chance against Trump? That's my first question. Second question related to basically what's happening now in the Middle East and so forth. Dual citizenship. Do you like the idea or not? I believe you're either an American 100% like I am, you know, and I don't care about the secondary nationality, which I might have been in the past. If somebody asks me, where were you from, etc., I respond with, I'm an American. Forget about everything else in the past.
All right, Joel, thank you for your questions. Let me address them seriatim, as they say if I were a lawyer, which I'm not. I have said for some time that I think that there is an internal dynamic going on currently in the Democratic Party in which professional Democrats are deeply concerned about Joe Biden's ability to win another general election. I think this is the accumulation of Biden's inability to perform in public, his obvious frailty. Sometimes he appears to be out of it, often reads the stage directions, seems confused, frail, really not up to the job. Now you add to that the impact of his policies. We have some of the highest gasoline prices in recent history. They may go down through manipulation, but he has, of course, drained the federal energy reserves in order to pull off that political sleight of hand. There's a 76% increase in the cost of basic groceries. We have ravaging inflation that is destroying the buying power for the average working American family. And I think we have to be candid. We have shipped billions of dollars to Ukraine. The U.S. media claims that Ukraine is prevailing in their war with Russia are contradicted by General Michael Flynn, by Colonel Douglas Macgregor, by a number of other military experts. There were actually admissions the other day by President of Ukraine Zelensky's top advisor, who admitted we are not winning the war. So I believe, first of all, that Barack Obama and Michelle Obama are the most influential and powerful figures in the modern Democratic Party. They are both extraordinarily popular with Democrats. They are also popular with voters. And I think there's an internal struggle. I think the Obamas believe it's time for Joe to go. Joe, in my opinion, doesn't want to go. He certainly doesn't want to give up his ability to potentially pardon his son, his brother, other members of his family, and perhaps even himself. And therefore, I don't see any circumstance under which he resigns, but I think it is possible that he could ultimately be prevailed upon not to run. There's been some evolution in my thinking. Now you have the problem of Kamala Harris. Professional Democrats that I respect also think that she is incapable of winning a general election. So the answer, in my mind, the strongest potential candidate that they could nominate would be Michelle Obama. People who are out there making jokes about Michelle Obama's gender make an egregious mistake. She is one of the most respected women in America. She has a non-political image, yet she is spending her time in voting registration drives. Just as her husband gave the keynote address at the Democrat National Convention prior to his nomination, she gave the keynote address at Joe Biden's convention. She's now published 2 biographies with her own kind of manipulated narrative of who she is and where she came from. She could easily raise the $100 million necessary to be a viable presidential candidate virtually overnight. She could easily qualify for the ballot. The Democrats just happened to have chosen Chicago, her hometown, as the site of their convention. The Democrats have also changed the primary voter lineup, essentially stripping Iowa, traditionally the first in the nation caucus state, in New Hampshire, nation primary state, of their delegates, to make South Carolina a state where there's an absolute majority of African Americans who dominate that state's Democratic primary, the first meaningful contest. So I think that it is entirely possible. I would go so far as to say, in my opinion, likely that Michelle Obama would emerge as a candidate for president. I think that Governor Gavin Newsom aspires to that position, but in the end, I think that he would accept the vice presidency on an Obama ticket. Those who underrate her prospects, I think, do themselves a gigantic disservice. So, to address your second question, let me say that I think dual citizenship for members of Congress is a very, very bad idea. I think members of Congress should be solely citizens of the United States. Thank you so much for your question. Folks, I'm Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show. If you have a question, that call-in number again, 800-848-9222. Let's go to Jeffrey in Wyckoff, New Jersey. Jeffrey, what is your question?
Yes, sir. The pleasure is mine. It wasn't so, listening to you answer the last question was a little bit frightening because it's something that I believed was going to happen for years. All that be said, I'd like to know what it was like to be the recipient of a weaponized Department of Justice at 3 o'clock in the morning when your house was invaded.
It is probably the most terrifying and horrific experience you could possibly imagine. Look, I was charged with the first-time nonviolent white-collar process crime of allegedly lying to Congress in my voluntary testimony before the House Intelligence Committee. Now, in order to violate the False Statements Act, your statement has to be willfully false, but it also has to be material, meaning it has to have concealed some underlying crime. The government made no allegation of Russian collusion against me. They sought to imply that I had colluded with WikiLeaks, although they admitted in their final report that that was not the case. And my lawyers were actually in touch with the special counsel's office the day before the 6 a.m. raid on my home. They could simply have said, your client is going to be charged tomorrow, he needs to turn himself in at the courthouse. And, of course, I would have done so. But that would have saved the taxpayers the $1.1 million that their over-the-top, made-for-television raid on my home cost. And it also would not have given CNN the opportunity to splash my arrest all over the news. I think that this was a tactic meant to intimidate me. I did absolutely nothing wrong. We now know definitively there was no Russian collusion, nor did I collaborate with WikiLeaks. I was charged solely to pressure me into testifying falsely against President Donald Trump. In other words, when special counsel Robert Mueller and his minions couldn't find any evidence of Russian collusion, they sought to create it, and I declined. My wife, who is hearing impaired, did not hear my over-the-top arrest, in which the FBI brought a battering ram up to my front door, pounded on the door, put me in handcuffs, and perp-walked me out into the street. She woke up looking down the barrel of an M4 fully automatic assault weapon. She didn't know whether it was a home invasion or what had transpired. It is a terrifying overreach by the federal government, but it had, I guess, for them, the desired effect on the public. It did not have the desired effect on me. Thank you so much for your question. Once again, folks, if you have a question, our number is 800-848-9222. Let's go to Alex in Kansas City. Alex, what is your question?
Roger, this is your favorite adopted nephew, Alex Stone. I just want to comment on the trials going on in Colorado, Minnesota, and New York. Roger, as a 19-year-old, I'm a Generation Zer, and I see right through this. And it's an unprecedented travesty of injustice that is going on against not only President Trump, but quite frankly, every United States citizen. The fact that a former United States president is being sued all over the country because he is winning in every poll shows that the people that they will never give up until President Trump is out of the way. My question for you, Roger, is what do you think will happen once these, quote, legal proceedings fail?
Well, we have to hope that they fail. I mean, look, I have been through the meat grinder of the D.C. Judicial system. I believe that my rights were violated in all of the pretrial motions made by the government. 100% of the pretrial motions by the government were granted by the trial judge. The trial judge said to me upon sentencing, you have been convicted of lying to cover up for Donald Trump. That's not what I was charged with, and there's no evidence whatsoever that I did that. It is only my fervent prayer and my faith and the support of a great wife, a great and loving wife, that got us through this ordeal. The side effect of it is, of course, that I'm censored for life on Facebook. I'm censored for life on Instagram. I'm censored for life on YouTube. By the way, they never tell you why you are censored, just that you are banned for life. So we have to hope that President Trump can prevail, although I have my questions. I think he has a good chance in the Southern Florida case, the so-called documents case. I'm not a lawyer, but I do think the 1977 Presidential Documents Act pretty much outlines that he had the authority to do anything he wanted with the documents. And his lawyers recently proved that the National Archives changed the status of his clearances for certain documents, which makes that entire indictment appear suspect. On the other hand, in D.C., where they are seeking to gag him while he's the leading candidate for president, I think it is very uphill. Obviously, he can always appeal in any of these jurisdictions, but there's a timing question. Would his appeal ultimately be heard long after the election is over? That is, I think, a very legitimate concern. Will we have an honest, free, fair, transparent election? Well, no state has changed its laws for election reform, at least none of the important swing states. I have enormous faith in Donald Trump. I also have enormous affection for him. As I said earlier in the show, I saw him Friday night. He seemed to be in extraordinarily good spirits. This is something that I think he has in common with Mayor Rudy Giuliani. They are both very tough men. They are going through hell, yet they keep on ticking. They remain optimistic. They remain resolute. They remain determined. Trump, I actually think, in an odd way, thrives on controversy. So I'm praying for a just result. I think the alternative to Donald Trump, sadly, is World War III. And watching what's happening in the Middle East, watching what happened in Afghanistan and the disastrous withdrawal there, watching what is happening in Ukraine, my fear is that the Communist Chinese are emboldened to make a move on Taiwan. That, in turn, limits this country's access to computer chips that are almost exclusively made on the Taiwanese island of nationalist China, which would, in turn, cause a stock market crash and perhaps even a depression. I am praying for a just result, but I have no illusions about the difficulty of the path ahead for Donald Trump. On the other hand, if there's anyone with the toughness, with the resilience to win this battle for the country, well, that would be Donald Trump. Alex Stone, my adopted nephew, thank you so much for your call. Let's go to Rich in Brooklyn, New York, who has a comment regarding the Adams-Sal Greco controversy.
How you doing, Roger? I just want to clarify. Adams, an NYPD cop, he was appointed to the transit police, and he came over to the NYPD after the merger in 1995. So therein lies a lot of controversy. Had he tried to come on to the NYPD directly, there might have been a little bit different outcome.
I did not know that. I appreciate that information. I know there's a lot of controversy about Mayor Adams' time inside NYPD. We addressed it earlier on the show. But Rich, thank you so much for your call.
Make another comment. You mentioned he was part of 100 black law enforcement. That that organization was a highly, highly respected organization back in the day. You had men like Hamilton Robinson in there, genuine, good men. So I would not, I would not put his name with that group, at least not from back in the day.
All right. Rich of Brooklyn, thank you so much for your call. This is, again, the Roger Stone Show. If you have a question, our lines are open at 800-848-9222. That's 800-848-9222. I have a text message here. This is from Loretta in Queens, who says, you gave us your great recipe for meatballs. I wrote it down as quickly as I possibly could, but what is your recipe for the sauce? Somehow I knew this was coming. Look, it's very simple. In this case, I saute some onions in olive oil. I like to use a garlic-infused olive oil. Then after the onions are translucent, I add minced garlic. Now, garlic has a much lower burning temperature than onions, and you never want to burn the garlic. If you burn any of this, you have to throw it out. You have ruined your sauce. After the garlic has had some time to saute, you add 2 or 3 cans of San Marzano tomatoes. Now, San Marzano is not a brand of tomato. It is a type of tomato that is sold by a number of purveyors in the United States. Gristedes has all of these ingredients, folks. Now, be very careful. If the can says San Marzano style tomatoes, well, that's a fugazi. You want actual San Marzano tomatoes. You dump the plum tomatoes with the juice into the pan where you have sauteed the garlic and the onions. And you then add salt and pepper to taste. I then add kind of 2-to-1 oregano to mixed Italian spices. And here's the secret from my Italian grandmother. 1 can of high-quality tomato paste and an equal amount of water. So fill the tomato paste can with water and let that cook down. You at the very end, you add a 1/4 cup of finely diced green pepper. Now, green pepper is very strong, and if you use too much, it will overpower the flavor of your sauce. So that is my basic Sunday gravy sauce. If you were listening at the top of the show, I went through my unique family meatball recipe. After those meatballs have had a chance to bake on the cookie sheet, and you use the water at the bottom of the oven to keep them moist, you drop them into the sauce, and you will have the perfect Sicilian sundae. So there is the answer. Thank you so much for your question. Let's see what we've got here. Larry in Brooklyn has a question regarding Eric Adams and the Mayorkas lies regarding our border. Larry, go ahead.
Hi, Roger. I'll make it quick. I have a comment and then a question. The reason I thought that Adams, the scandal was hooked up with him exposing the border by going down to South America is because Mayorkas was constantly issuing the same line by saying a simple lie: the border is secure. The border is secure. So I figure Adams was exposing that lie because he was making it into an obvious lie. And that's why I think it's hooked up with that. But my question is this. I want to know what made President Trump think that he could get a fair trial from a corrupt party hack like Judge Engoron, okay, if you look at his career, I mean, first of all, the guy, I think, was wearing lipstick in the courtroom, snickering like Bozo the Clown. What made him think he could get an honest trial from this guy who didn't trust the heart and soul of New Yorkers where he spent his career?
Well, first of all, I don't think he thinks he can get a fair trial. I think he said that. He made a motion for the judge to recuse himself. The judge refused. It is false that a mistake by Trump's lawyers denied Trump a jury trial. That is simply incorrect. The Attorney General, Letitia James, brought this action against Donald Trump under a law in which he is not entitled to a jury trial. So he doesn't have any choice. He was charged, I think, ridiculously, because there's no victim here. Donald Trump borrowed money at handsome interest rates. The banks used their own appraisals, used their own legal advice. They also had a disclaimer letter. They got paid back in full, and they made a lot of money. So who was harmed? This case will probably go against the president at the trial court level, since it is all in the hands of the judge. There is no jury, and then it will ultimately be appealed. Thank you so much for your question. Let's see. We have Patrick in New Jersey. Patrick, what is your question?
My honor to speak to you, Mr. Stone. Yes, I wanted to know why Dobbs said that he didn't think Trump would have a chance of doing anything about the cartel-guaranteed southern border.
Well, first of all, I didn't have an opportunity to listen to all of Lou Dobbs' show. I have often been a guest on his Great American podcast. I have the highest possible regard for Lou Dobbs as a journalist and as a newscaster. The odds are overwhelming here. Trump will only be able to close our borders, secure our borders, if he is reelected president, and I pray for that. Thank you, Patrick, so much for your question. I'm Roger Stone. This has been The Roger Stone Show, and we will see you next week.